Welcome back to our weekly series, Doodling with Purpose, a week-by-week guide to learning ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, glyph by glyph, word by word, tense by tense. We're getting up to some sentences at this point because we've introduced the magic of verbs. Yes, if you're learning any foreign language, verbs are where the language comes together. And we talked a little bit last week about the difference between the base form and the ing form of the verb, which is sometimes called present continuous tense, meaning someone is continuing to do something. He is playing or isn't playing. Well, for sanity's sake, we're going to call this form the infinitive. It's the to plus verb, to do something. And before we review again the infinitive form, it's going to be very helpful to look back at prepositions. We learned these quite a few lessons ago, and hopefully you have flashcards. But just a quick review, the owl M is in, was, from, or as. The water N is to, towards people, for, or it could mean of, like for the ka of. R, the mouth, is to or towards a place, or at. And in, the papyrus plus water, is by. And chana is with, the flax, the water, and the hand. All right, so with those behind us and another quick review of that infinitive form we learned last week, there's 4 classes of Egyptian verbs: strong, doubling, weak, and extra weak. And for the infinitive, they basically go from helpful to not helpful at all. Or I'm sorry, the reverse of that. Strong verbs are the least helpful, and extra weak are the most helpful, because in the infinitive form, weak verbs and extra weak verbs get an extra T at the end to help us recognize them. So here's an example. Here is a weak verb, st, which is spear or to spear. So because this is a weak verb, and so the pronunciation, S for the bolt of cloth, T for the hill, and then the determinative for a spear. So because it's a weak verb, you'll add an extra T, and now we know it is spearing, not just you spear something, but the person is spearing. They're continuing to do something for a set amount of time. So let's put that into a sentence. St, and we don't need to pronounce that extra T, r, ram. So spearing, remember the R is towards an object, so towards or at, and rum is fish. In this case, I've used the determinative for fish with 3 stroke lines. I didn't want to have too many R's next to each other to make this easier to read. So the full sentence is going to be spearing at or spearing towards the fish. Either translation is acceptable, spearing at the fish or spearing towards the fish, because the mouth R is the preposition at or towards. And again, the word fish is ram, but it can also be written with a determinative for fish with the stroke lines. If you see the stroke lines under the determinative, it means it actually is that object, not just a determinative. All right, so now let's look at a strong verb that doesn't get the extra T. So here we have ama, hand, owl, hand, vulture. And this is the verb throw. So if we put this into a sentence, ama, ram, throwing at or towards the fish. But how do we know if this is throw at the fish or throwing at the fish? Because strong verbs don't get an extra T the way weak verbs do. So there's no clue to tell us what tense we're in. Well, there is a clue in the sense of context clues. Most likely, sentences aren't going to be isolated. So if you see 2 sentences together, in this case, we have st-ra-ram, ama-ra-ram. Spearing at the fish, throw or throwing at the fish. We have a weak verb in the first sentence, which gets an extra T, which tells us the verb is in the infinitive form, the ing form. The second verb is a strong verb, so it doesn't get the extra T. But because it is in the same paragraph, shall we say, as the first sentence, which does have a weak verb and tells us it's an ing infinitive form, throwing spearing at the fish, not spear at the fish, well, that lets us make a decision of whether the second sentence is throw at the fish or throwing at the fish. We can look at the first sentence and recognize the clue in the weak verb with the extra T, meaning it's an infinitive form. And therefore, the second sentence is also going to be in the same verb form of the infinitive, throwing at the fish, not throw at the fish. And that's how we can use context clues in different sentences in the same paragraph to understand what tense a verb is in, even if that verb doesn't give us a clue, because in this case, in the infinitive form, the clues are only available for weak and extra weak verbs, getting that extra T. Strong and doubling verbs do not. All right, next week we're going to move on to the present tense as we continue to collect our verb terms, and as we put more and more together, it's going to get easier and easier to read more sentences. And remember, practice everything, not just your glyphs, but you should be making flashcards for all these words, the prepositions, the verbs, everything. If you like this series and this video, please do give it a like and a subscription and a comment. It helps tell YouTube to share it with more people, and it's fun to share knowledge online. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for more doodling with purpose.